here we are for the Friday Live feature, and I am all kinds of rattled, but I have to say in a fairly good way, because tomorrow is the date of our 3-year anniversary of having moved to Sweden. When we arrived, the house that we're in was under heavy revision. It had been falling down and kind of beaten up, and it is my wife's kind of ancestral home, having been lived in by her grandparents since the early 60s, and is the place where her mom had grown up for part of her life, and also is the place basically where my wife and all of her immediate family effectively lived a certain amount of every year throughout their lives. When I started visiting Sweden quite some time ago, this is where we stayed. Anyway, we have this. This is where we live. We own this with our kids. And it was the room that you're looking at right now. This way is the front of the house. And this room is a little bit sunken. And the big, beautiful tree that was right out in the front yard there had, over the decades, infiltrated the floor beneath which I sit at the moment, and basically was growing up, into the house, and was effectively kind of tipping the house over, this portion of it, simply by having, brought its tendrils up underneath the whole thing and just growing up into the floor. Quite a shock to the workers when the whole point was to refloor this area, to discover that they now had to literally chop and dig out, this massive vegetative entity, sort of like the battle of, the battle with the Ent situation. So anyway, we ended up with this very nice room, and it's still got a little bit of junk in it. Feel bad about that. Could really use the landscaping that I planned. The original plan was to have a kind of a couch bed, running lengthwise along that corner, and then you'd have the bookshelves instead of just these stand-ups that I've got in here now. Then we'd have bookshelves actually built into the wall above it. Nice study guest kind of place. But anyway, that was just the tiniest part of massive, necessary house revision. And anybody who's been through anything like that knows just what that can mean. And in a house this old, it ended up, being a pretty much what we came here to do. Much of it is done. The house is now, for example, standing, which is good. Before there were its various component pieces were more leaning rather upon one another rather than standing. But so that's fixed up. And let's see, I was telling the fascinating story though. All right, so my wife and I, as planned, land in Sweden with 3 kids. At the time, 9 and 8 years old. And we, as planned, none of this, I had been, coming back and forth across the water for, a year for construction planning and financial setups and all the things you have to do. And, we had this down. So there's this very famous community a little bit up the coast from us called Kolmården. It's very famous because of the world-class zoo there. The mountains are also famous because they were a lawless region of Sweden through much of its colorful history, and those mountains are full of bandit stories and pirate stories and monster stories and stuff like that. Well, anyway, so the community called Kolmården, most people don't hardly even know it's there because they just call the zoo that. But anyway, the community there is this little village. There's another one there called Krokek. And there's a campground there, which has got it's kind of more like a retreat cabin kind of place where you overlook the water, the Hän, as it's called, which to people who don't live here is sort of kind of ocean that kind of goes inland, but is big. It's not a fjord, not a fjord like in Norway. It's kind of like a very big bay that goes really far in. So anyway, we live on the shores of one of those, and so you're overlooking this camp. You're on this cabin, and you're overlooking this into this gorgeous, gorgeous water, and it's just really nice. There's all these cabins are near each other, and they in a row. They've got shared decks in the pairs, and I was looking at it and saying, this has got to be one of these days a big role-playing symposium retreat kind of place. We have just got to do that. And this is a couple of weeks at the moment. This period is between Easter and Ascension. Ascension is sort of the last part of Easter, and he ascends, right? Up he goes. So that's a big holiday here, and everybody goes on vacation. But before that, nobody was using this campground, so we were there, with just a very few other people. And I was thinking, oh, this is the perfect time for this. We should do this. So 3 years ago, I was thinking about that, and I'm still thinking about it now. So keep that in mind for 2021, should it be feasible. Well, okay. We have this kind of fascinating situation of landing, and the house is nowhere, we knew this, nowhere near anybody living in it. I mean, the beat up old toilets have been pulled out and are like sitting in the yard in the front. And we've got our stuff is in this situation. We have luggage, and a month previous, we had shipped the bulk of our actual stuff to Sweden, but of course it was still en route. So that means that we arrive before it arrives. And so we're subsisting on, our luggage. We stay in the cabin for a little while, and then after a bit, finally enough area is cleared in the house and enough things are rendered functional, sort of like a piece of the kitchen gets wired so that we can actually use things in it, while the rest of it is a construction zone. Same thing for laundry and a couple of other things. We get a couple of appliances working, and the rest is, still being done. And so we move in at that point. We're living pretty much on air mattresses, in these few little cleared places. And then that was about a month in, or a few weeks in. So I believe it was the first week in June that we were able to actually get in. And then the rest of the year, basically it became more and more and more and less house, and less and less and less construction zone. And the construction zones around it, like building the deck and stuff like that, were occurring, just afterwards. And that continued actually quite a while. The addition to the house where the kids' rooms are now was actually under construction late into the fall. The Halloween that we did, for example, we had to cover up the back hole with a big tarp, which is where the entrance to the new area was, because it was just all construction. So yeah, 2017 was, living in the construction zone, and, doing things like dragging busted old toilets, out of the yard eventually. You can rest assured that did eventually happen, although we kind of got used to them for a little bit, and I sort of felt bad when our yard toilets went away. Anyway, so that was kind of a bit of the saga. I actually found that less of a hassle than figuring out new bank accounts. We had set some up, certainly, but you know how it is. You get there and you're actually dealing with the banks and wondering, was this the right one? And all sorts of things like that. And learning about Swish. All right, I'm keeping this brief. This is just sort of a not very exciting Friday Live feature, not much polemic. We're bonding, right? Well, here's what was the big shock. All right, Swedes, brace yourselves. You're going to like this. Okay, so the construction guys, who were incredibly good and incredibly professional, So because we're like getting all of our finances, rubber stamped. I mean, it's fine to talk about it and fine to set it up, but it's not the same as actually being there and able to use the funds. So we're getting all this figured out, and the construction guys are like, okay, figure it out, and then you can pay us, and that's good. And we really wanted to get this settled. And so the boss, the dude, the owner, says, okay, you can swish us. Swish you. Visions circle in our heads. We have no idea what swishing a person is. Apparently something to do with money. And so to dispel the mystery, Swish is an app, and everybody in Sweden has Swish on their phone, and you tie it to your bank account, and you can pay people with Swish by punching in their recipient phone number. If you're a business, you get a recipient Swish number. You don't use it to spend things, you use it to receive. And therefore I can, I open Swish and I punch in their number, or I scan it, and the number pops in. And I type in the amount and I punch Swish. It then connects me to my bank account, which is another app that you have a code for. So, that basically you do a PIN so that it can get into your bank account for the moment. And it transfers the money. That's right. You heard me. It's a transfer. So it's not like an ATM where there's like an intermediate activity of any kind. Your money goes from your account into their account. Just bam. In Sweden, you pay with Swish a lot. It's not, at the counter of a store, you'll typically pay with, an ATM card. But if you do things like a street vendor, right? When somebody's selling sausages at the street fair and they've got a Swish number, or you're at a convention and somebody is selling T-shirts, or you're buying a game, from one of the many small businesses at the convention, and you Swish them, and you use it a lot. Not just for casual purposes, because we're talking here about major construction. We're talking about monstrous sums. And he says, go ahead and Swish. And I was like, first of all, what is it? But then second, the notion that you are handling this monster transaction through this incredibly straightforward method. Because basically it's in your account and now it's gone and it's in their account. There is no transitional phase. It's just, they got it. So, you punch the Swish and there's even like a little green screen that comes up, and the other person, should they be so minded, can tap it is a final confirmation that this was done in the records. And that was it. That was all for your construction bill. It was just it's revelatory. The Swedes are laughing. They're saying, what do you mean? Everybody knows that. No, no, my friends, everybody does not know this. All right. So that was quite the experience. What else? Well, I was asked to discuss bioluminescence, and I'm not. We'll save bioluminescence for next week. It's been an interesting week. I have been producing content for the game that has recently just been published and has been landing in people's mailboxes all over the world, which is Champions Now. And that, as the designer, although not the publisher, but as the designer, I find myself daily inundated with interviews and hassles and questions and suggestions, of course, observations. Everybody loves observations about the book that just gets published. No, they don't, actually. So anyway, I've been kind of busy, been trying to work out some tax issues from my first year in business, and I've managed, to bungle them badly. So fixing that. And I've been a little busy. But tomorrow, the kids want to celebrate, and we're trying to figure out, what kind of cake to make and stuff like that, and what I'm going to grill. And I am looking forward to all of it. And I think with everything going on and all the possible hassles or criticisms or, complaints that one may have upon moving to another country and genuinely trying to be there, I'm not an expat, as I say, I have immigrated here, and it is a big commitment of that kind. Well, even with all the hassles that go with that, we are extremely and repeatedly and often confirmed in being so glad we did this. So happy Immigration Day to me and mine, and with great joy and gratitude to family and friends here